All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to My Third Eye. Today, I am joined by Ryan Dean. You all know who he is from Dangerous World Podcast, and Cory Hughes from coryhughes.org. We are going to discuss the JFK assassination. So, how are you, Cory?
I'm good. Thank you.
Let people know where they can find your work.
Sure. All my stuff is at coryhughes.org. And that's pretty much the best place because it has links to all my videos and podcasts and whatnot.
Awesome. Ryan, how are you today?
Good, man. Same old stuff. Just another good day to be learning about some new information.
Yes, absolutely.
How are you? No one ever asked you how you are.
I'm always good. I mean, I don't know. I try not to ever have bad days, but when I do, they are the shittiest days on the planet. But I try not to let shit bother me. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm doing good. Other than the puppy's having a little bit of a thing today. So
we were rocking a Green Bay shirt. They just had an embarrassing performance against who was it? The Titans. That was god awful. Yeah. Hey, you win some, you lose some.
Apparently, we're losing a lot. So
yeah,
all good. So where do you want to start, Cory?
Anywhere you like. I can pick up pretty much from whatever questions you have. We can run with.
Well, let's start with the beginning. You break down your case, and if we have questions, we'll jump in and we'll go from there. Because
should we let the people know what we're talking about here?
I did say the JFK assassination.
Okay, yeah, because that's it's definitely very interesting, significant for today as well. You know, the day that this episode's coming out here. So, yeah, man, it's interesting stuff, and I haven't heard what you get into here, Cory. So I'm really pumped to hear some information I haven't heard about this, man. So yeah, wherever you think you want to start.
Okay, so well, most people when they talk about the Kennedy assassination and researchers who get into the Kennedy assassination, one thing I find is that all of them seem to study just the Kennedy assassination. And the Kennedy assassination is like one piece of a much larger puzzle. And so if you really want to understand the Kennedy assassination, for me, it goes back to like the late 1800s and all through World War I, World War II, and then even after Kennedy, you can continue in world events tracking things that were the direct result of the Kennedy assassination, right? Like through Iran-Contra, Oklahoma City, 9/11, all these things, right? These are not, like, to me, individual events. These are all continuations of the same operation, right? So for me, when you really start to understand who was behind the assassination and how it was pulled off, it really comes down to the study of relationships, right? And when you start to study relationships, you can really how big do you think the connection map surrounding Jeffrey Epstein is? I mean, in the thousands, right? And so when you get into history, really history is seemingly this long study of relationships. And when you study the relationships that are directly responsible for the Kennedy assassination, you'll find that the motivations and the mindset and the ideologies of the people who were behind it really go back quite some distance. And so when most people start to study Kennedy and they really don't seem to understand up from down, it's because they don't understand the mechanism by which the assassination was pulled off, right? And so you have to think, all the guys involved in the assassination, particularly the shooters and the handlers above them, all of them were working with the mafia and with the CIA and with the FBI. And in working with all those organizations who really are fundamentally one organization, right? Especially in 1963. You really come to find that there are outside influences that have kind of co-opted our country that have been in place for at least 100 years. And so when people blame the CIA or the FBI, to me, it's a joke, because who are the forces that are controlling those organizations? And I'll tell you that their interests are not in America. They're not in continuing the American dream or supporting the American people or any of that stuff, right? So it all kind of came to a head with the Kennedy assassination. And ultimately, Kennedy was killed over Israel and their need for the nuclear bomb. Kennedy's number one priority, going back to 1960 when he became president, was nuclear deproliferation, right? Getting rid of nukes. And he was heavily involved in talks with Khrushchev through back channels on getting rid of nukes, right? But of course, you have savages on both sides. Neither men could get anything done with the CIA infrastructure surrounding him, and in the Soviet Union with the KGB infrastructure and all the powerful people other than Khrushchev. Those two guys weren't ever going to be able to work together on any meaningful level because of the forces behind them, right? So,
right. I was going to actually ask you, Cory. You're mentioning, the mob, Vegas interests and things like this, which I'm assuming are kind of linked. The CIA, the FBI. Are they acting against the government, or are they acting on behalf of the government in this instance here?
what day is it? On Mondays they're working with the government. On Wednesdays they're working against the government. So it's they were definitely against Kennedy. So like I said, it's a study of relationships, and you have to go back to like the 1940s to understand the relationship between the government and the mob. When Lucky Luciano controlled the docks, and Albert Anastasia controlled the docks and the longshoresmen and all the unions up there, and so basically the government was concerned about Nazi spies like smuggling stuff into the country. And how do you get stuff into the country in the 1940s? You get it in the country through the docks, right?
Yeah.
And that was controlled by the mob across the country. Like there were no docks in America that were not controlled by the mafia in the 1940s, and that held true through the 1960s, and probably just fell apart in the 1970s. So yeah, the government had no choice but to go to the fucking mob. And who'd they go to? They went to Lucky Luciano, who really was not in charge of anything. I mean, he was a boss for sure, but he was a front boss for a guy named Meyer Lansky. And when you think about it, like Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano, Albert Anastasia, Lepke Buchalter, these guys were all Jews. These guys were Italians, but they were not Sicilian Italians. And most people don't understand this about the mob. Most people look at The Godfather, and it's like, those are portrayals of Sicilians. Those are not portrayals of just Italians in general, right? And so the vast majority of the mob really had never been controlled by Sicilians, ever. Between 1921 and 1931, you had Salvatore Maranzano, who was a boss out in New York, and Joe Masseria was his number two. And he got whacked in 1931 by Meyer Lansky. Okay, Meyer Lansky sent Albert Anastasia and all those guys I just mentioned to go take out Sal Maranzano. And when they did, in 1931, basically Jews took control of the mob, and that was the mob boss of all time was Meyer Lansky from 31 through the late 70s when he went on the run. And all the names you hear, Giancana, Trafficante, all these guys were front bosses ultimately. And so the image that most people have of the United States mafia is totally wrong. And so that's a crucial piece of the puzzle in understanding why the U.S. mafia would be working with the Israelis. And so the Israelis had been working with the fucking mob since 1946. There had been some talks going back to 45 between Ben Gurion and Meyer Lansky, but in 46, they kind of sealed the relationship by sending a guy named Reuven Daphne to Los Angeles. And Reuven Daphne met with Bugsy Siegel. And Bugsy Siegel, another Jew, right? Italian Jew.
Khazarians, though, right? I understand that.
That's a whole different conversation. That's
Okay.
a vast conversation right there. So
Sure, I was
but
just
sure,
saying,
yeah.
just
Ultimately.
for sake of and I'm not like overly sensitive about shit, but like the whole idea that like the Jews are ruining the whole world for everybody else. It's a specific sect of
Right.
people, right? I mean, like
Correct.
it's a very interesting
Yeah,
situation.
right. You're talking about like ultimately the Zionists. And
Yes, exactly.
right. And that becomes a very complicated conversation, because in the modern day world, see, when you look at what Zionism is, and that to me goes back to 1897 and Theodor Herzl, and 1894 and like the Dreyfus Affair, which inspired Herzl. But ultimately, Herzl was a complete fucking rabid anti-Semite to himself. Like, he believed that there were two distinct classes of Jews, that there were the upper class aristocratic Jews who control everything and openly admit it, and who are total cunts. And then there are the regular Jews out there in the world who are just, might not even be very religious, but they're born to Jewish families.
Yeah.
And that makes up really the majority of Jewish people, right? And they knew this when they kind of formulated political Zionism, and they really had no respect, or they had a lot of disdain for the average Jew, because they felt that they were kind of a poor representation of the brand. It's really kind of how, when you read Herzl's diaries, he befriended and fostered anti-Semitism amongst non-Jews because he hoped to undermine Jewish wealth all over the world. And once Jews felt like they were undermined in every country around the world, then that would cause such a fervor for there to create a state of Israel for all the Jews to go and return to, right? So these Zionists, these early Zionists, really instigated the anti-Semitism, and they continue it to this very day. Organizations like the ADL, they continue to foster anti-Semitism, and they go, "Ha, see, anti-Semite, we're here to save the fucking day." And
same thing with BLM.
Same thing with BLM. It's a total fucking ploy. But the difference is the ADL are they're true ideologues. I mean, they're fucking lunatics at heart. They're the ultimate in racists. Period. They're Jewish supremacists of the highest degree, which is kind of funny because modern day Jews are not descended from the Israelites. They're descended from the Khazarians.
Yes.
They're descended from the Khazars. They're descendants of converts, right? And so we get this moral high ground from seemingly the entire world of Jewish people, and they're not even descendant from the fucking people they claim. Their origins are not what they claim. They're a bunch of fucking phonies. Sorry, but that's the reality. Like it's like the analogy I'll give is like that episode of South Park when Cartman went off and became a rapper, and then he's like, "Y'all just hate me because I'm black." Right?
Well, hey, I'll take it a step further. Have you seen where Cartman becomes a rabbi in the future?
No, I haven't seen that one.
And Kyle thinks it's like a giant ploy just to fuck with him because he's always making fun of the Jews. So it's hilarious.
It's hilarious.
But
see, that's
South
a
Park
whole
all the time. I'm glad you do too, Cory. This is awesome.
It's a conversation that like I try to avoid at all costs because it really just doesn't fucking help the conversation at all. Right. I mean, it's the ultimate black pill, really, and so Kennedy, it's kind of hard to separate Kennedy from that because those are the people who were behind the assassination, right? When you come to understand the relationship between the Israelis, the CIA, and the mafia, they're one organization in 1963, inseparable. And the amount of like traitorous espionage that went on like on multiple continents because of those organizations and their relationships with like the Corsican mafia, and like then they have like a corporate infrastructure through businesses like there was a company called Permindex, which was a Mossad front company, and basically they were like the oversight board for assassinations. And the oversight board was the board of directors was like a who's who of like mob guys, CIA guys, intelligence guys, like you just every fucking possible scumbag had representation inside of Permindex. And so Permindex, which was founded by a guy named George Mandel, aka George Mantello, he basically was a Mossad spy. He's hailed as like a hero during the Holocaust, but that's all like bullshit, cover story. He founded Permindex basically so they could fund right-wing organizations in Europe to undermine democracies, right? That's what they did. And so they're responsible for numerous attempts on the life of Charles de Gaulle. There was actually a movie made about it called Day of the Jackal. Day of the Jackal came out in the 1970s, shortly after these events happened. Kind of interesting, kind of makes you think, how did Hollywood get some inside information to make these movies so shortly after these assassination attempts occurred? And then you come to think about it and you're like, oh yeah, Jack Valente was the man running Hollywood from 66 to like 2007, 40 years he ran Hollywood, and he was the shooter on the grassy knoll. Okay. And so when you come to understand the relationships of these people and like the intertangledness between the media and intelligence, and it's just like the world is such a scary fucking place and nobody has any idea, really. But where was I? I have a tendency to go off on tangents, so you have to rein me back in every once in a while.
That was a solid tangent to go down. I mean, you're speaking of Permindex, and they owned a subsidiary of theirs, if I'm not mistaken, was either Hotels or Resorts International. And
well, they owned Centro Mundial Comercial was the only subsidiary, and Centro Mundial Comercial was basically it owned stock. Basically, it bought stock in companies that were manufacturing parts for nuclear reactors or energy or oil. And that's all they did. They were a funneler of money, and they hid the funneling of the funding for the assassination through other trade deals that they did for commodities and things like that. But that's all they did. But no, they owned. There was like Hilton Hotels, Hyatt Hotels, like all these hotel companies were all in bed with the CIA. The CIA recruited so many people, and they really did it mostly when they were the OSS during World War II, because they recruited 40,000 plus people in 4 years during the war. And so then the CIA, quote unquote, isn't there until 47. But then in 47, all those recruitments from the OSS days, they just pulled back into their network. And when in 47, when the CIA flipped on the lights, they immediately had networks in the multi-millions around the world that they could access instantaneously. So when people will try to wonder how they gained so much power like right away, that's how they did it, by recruiting Nazis and their entire spy networks, and by recruiting businessmen, by recruiting former heads of governments who still had influence. Like by the time the CIA came about in 47, which really was the product of Reinhard Gehlen, you had like Bill Donovan and Alan Dulles and Angleton and those guys who were the big shots in the OSS, but like they seemingly lacked guidance. And so after the war, they cut a deal with Reinhard Gehlen, right? So Adolf Hitler's spy master and the head general in the German army, who eventually they will put back in charge of German intelligence in 47 or 48, which is hilarious. But between 45 and 47, these guys were down in South America with over 200,000 fucking Nazis that they had smuggled out of Africa, North Africa, and Europe, like prior to Paperclip. Everyone talks about fucking Paperclip. Paperclip is a joke compared to I can't recall the operation's name before. It might have been like Avalanche or something like that. I don't remember it. But there was an operation to smuggle the fucking Nazis out of Europe and Africa, and they smuggled about 230,000 of them into South America. And then those Nazis went on to become what was called the Gehlen Organization. And the Gehlen Organization is like the one organization in the world no one ever knows about, no one ever talks about, and has shaped the world to a degree that would blow your fucking mind. Like the Gehlen Organization is responsible for creating NATO, the 17 intelligence agencies, including the BND, which is the German intelligence agency, which then, after being the top German fucking spy, Alan Dulles puts him back in charge of the German intelligence and basically managing over this new alliance under like the United Nations and NATO and all that stuff, right? So initially NATO was
for the job, huh? That's
definitely... Oh yeah, but he fucking played them so well, because what he did was like he had all of Germany's intelligence, but he didn't just give it to them. He like had his men bury it like the Nazi gold, like, and they took, because that back then it was all on paper, right? Like, and so they took paper in huge boxes and crates and just buried it all over fucking Europe, and that was his bargaining chip. And I don't even know that all of it has been recovered at this point. Just so we know, the Nazi gold hasn't all been recovered. I mean, perhaps it has, and we just don't know about it. But yeah, that's how Reinhard Gehlen got his foothold in American intelligence, and he basically went on to form the security state that we live under today. So if you want to understand why the world seems like it's run by a bunch of fucking Nazis, it's because it was built by Nazis.
I have one question. I don't know if it ties into anything. The CIA was founded in 47.
Correct.
From the OSS. And then in 48, Israel, the state is formed. Is there any type of, I mean, to me, that looks like a coincidence to me.
These are all the same people. No. Like, you don't even try to separate these people. Like, they might be different governments, different religions, whatever. These people are one organization that basically formed the cabal that still is today. I mean, you can trace these people's actions from immediately after World War II, especially like the fucking Israelis, I call them the Israelis because even though Israel isn't around yet, it's literally the same fucking people causing havoc going back to like the 20s, right? So even before World War II, it's the fucking Israelis like Ben Gurion and Chaim Weizmann and all of these fucking guys, like worst people that have ever walked planet Earth.
So doesn't it go back way for me to say, and I might get a little bit of heat for this, that the Palestinians are actually the good guys in this situation over there?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a given. But the reality is the original Israelites were black, right. black Africans. So you know, all the alleged traditions and cultures that go back 5,000 years, they don't. They go back about 1,500 years to about 550 AD with the codification of the Babylonian Talmud, which has nothing to do with the black Israelites who fucking basically went extinct post 70 AD. So allegedly 70 AD, you have the expulsion of the Jews, which they weren't even called Jews back then. They were expelled from Palestine when the temple was destroyed, right? But this is like where modern day Palestine is, right? And so all these people who had been, see, the original location of Palestine, the original location of the first temple, there's a lot of evidence that indicates it wasn't even in modern Palestine. It was actually in a region of northern Ethiopia. And that would kind of align with the Ethiopians who claim to have the Ark in a fucking temple there, right? So all the original, when you look at things like the Shushan temple, right? And so when you look at all the original Hebrew artifacts and all the original impressions and paintings, and they all indicate that these were black people, like with big afros and big afro beards and stuff, like had nothing to do. There were no fucking white people who were slaves in Egypt 5,000 years ago. It's just a fucking joke. But yeah, like the Khazarians were an empire unto themselves, and kind of like Genghis Khan is described as an empire of tents, right? Like they followed a religion called Tangridism, which was kind of like a black magic, shamanistic kind of thing. It's the same thing that Attila the Hun and those guys all were a part of. But the word on the street, and nobody really knows because a lot of these old documents pertaining to Khazaria have been destroyed. Wonder why. So there's not a lot of really verifiable history. There's only a couple books that have some things that were translated from other books from hundreds of years ago. So it's really hard to pin down, but it appears as though the Khazarians, or the Khazarian Empire, the leadership was forced to convert to one of the Abrahamic religions, right? And so they picked Judaism, and they were basically forced to stick with it. And they adopted the at the time, new Babylonian Talmud, but they kind of melded it with their black magic practices, right? And so these were the original white Jews in the world, period. There were no white Jews on the planet until 740 AD when these Khazarians converted, right? But allegedly they integrated their black magic practices into the religion itself, right? They kind of made this hybridization, and that is eventually what became modern day Judaism. And so and what you have is in about 1200, 1220 AD, you have the Russians. So they were pre-Soviets, right? So you have the Russian Empire, and so they've just basically had enough of the Khazarians, and they invade and they force the Khazarians to scatter. And so this completely coincides with the timing of if you see in the history books about the great influx of white Jews into Europe, settling in Poland and Germany and other places, right? So the expulsion of the Khazarians completely coincides with the modern history of the Jewish influx in the 13th century.
Oh shit! Now I can kind of see. I'm gonna get heat again.
Yeah,
Hitler,
I get heat for this all the time, and this
so
is just real history. This isn't like my
Hitler
opinions on
like,
anything.
Hey, no, we don't want these fuckers, and get the fuck out.
Right, and that around the 1200s is when you start to see the cases of ritual murder start to pop up throughout Europe. You don't see that before 1200s. Which also coincides. And so when you look at the history of the Jewish people post 1200 AD, they've been run out of 116 or 117 countries. Like thousands of cities have run them out of town for failure to integrate, unethical business practices, and also suspicion of ritual murders, which really still go on to this very day. And I will tell you, up to and including the assassination of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, and Martin Luther King were all conducted in a manner consistent with Jewish ritual sacrifice. So, and that I can screen share. That I can show you some things if you want to see.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely.
All right, give me about a minute to pull all of my stuff up. I wasn't gonna do much screen share. It gets harder and harder on me to do this stuff.
Well, while you look up your stuff, I would say, to Ghost, I don't know if you remember when we were talking about the Pilgrim Society, you and I were, and then we talked about separately. I talked about the Safari Club and all this stuff, and the Safari Club comes out of a lot of the shit that Permindex was doing. And
can you name any of the members of the Safari Club?
There's Salem bin Laden, right? I mean, he was involved. There's quite a few. There
was a Moroccan involved. Do you remember the name of the Moroccan general involved?
No, but I do remember the Saudi arms dealer.
Okay.
The
Moroccan general, real quick, the Moroccan general involved was a guy named Ahmed Dalimi. And Ahmed
That's right.
Delimi was also the dark complected man in Dealey Plaza, who was next to the Umbrella Man.
Oh my God. So this is why he gets that spot, is because of
He was a Mossad
his
assassination
role.
coordinator back then. You see, the relationship between Morocco and Israel was super tight
Mhm.
because there was a big influx of Sephardic Jews in Morocco. And so Israel knew that they could exploit that in their relationship with them, and they did. And so for a long time, you had a very tight intelligence relationship between Morocco. They were in the fold with us included, but the fold kind of fell apart sometime in the 1980s, when we went into Afghanistan. Eventually, the cabal ended up at the time of 9/11 was Israel, Saudis, and us, right? After the many, decades of changes. But in the modern era, it's us and Israel. That's it. The
Yeah,
cabal
sure.
that is fucking the whole world is us and Israel. And let me tell you what, America is not the one calling the shots.
Well, hey,
No.
buddy, it ain't
So,
us. It ain't the
No.
three of us. Okay, don't lump me in with them. We're trying to be normal. I'm trying to make a little bit of money betting and doing a podcast. I'm not,
mhm.
So
fucking with.
here's the thing: if Kanye would have just came out and maybe articulated his words a little bit better, kind of like what you're doing, Cory, and we are, he actually was probably stumbling onto some correct shit.
Right, but a lot of the people out there who they just don't understand the things to articulate, right? Like my
Right.
knowledge of this is really deep because I've been studying this for years. And most people can't say the same, right? So it's really
Right.
difficult. You might know a little bit, but not enough to be able to say, this is the deal. Fortunately, I have made it a point to study those particular things.
Which I'm glad someone like you did, because I know that a lot of this goes over my head in certain areas, but then in certain areas, it's like, oh shit, light bulbs just start fucking firing off. And it's like, wow, okay, this is all making sense now. And all the connections that I mean, it's a huge fucking spider web.
Well, I was
Oh,
going to
it's
say
it's the
too.
biggest. The Kennedy is the center of the universe. Like
It
Kennedy
seems
connects
like
to
it was the
everything.
beginning of a ritual too, like a long-standing ritual. Maybe not the beginning, but like more so with the United States, because you get like the first like credit card coming out around then as well, and like all kinds of weird shit kind of ties together
And then
within
you
that.
fast forward to 9/11, and you have the dancing Israelis. And it's like
Mhm.
Right.
making another ritual. It's like, fuck.
Okay, so this right here is a frame from the Robert Hughes film, and this has been tampered with. You really can't tell anything. Everybody has been smudged and blurred out, right? Like you can clearly see, like right here, a face has been just smudged out with black ink,
Mhm.
right? All these people are smudged. You can't see a damn thing, right? So, but these people like to leave a calling card, and so I did happen to find one single frame, this almost identical frame, but I realized that the frame that I found was not tampered with, and it looks like this. It's virtually a different picture, but
Wow.
it's the same thing. Like when you go back and look, like this is the person in this Greco-Roman style robes here, and you can clearly see a face on the person. But when you go back to this is the official standardized
Yeah.
version. The face has been blacked out, right? So this is clearly tampered with. You
Yeah,
can't see
zoom in to
any
cut.
details on anything. But when you zoom in here, well, number one, you can clearly see that that's JD Tippett, the officer who's about to be shot at around 1 o'clock in Oak Cliff. He's standing on Houston Street. Like nobody's ever pointed that out before. But as you go through this like assembly of people here standing on Houston Street, and this is at the time of the assassination because this is the motorcycle cops who are behind Kennedy as the motorcade is pulling around the corner onto Elm Street. Okay, so if you take a look on the right here, you'll see there's a person wearing a costume of a parrot. You can see the yellow head with the black
Yeah.
eyes and the orange beak. I think there's some other people wearing costumes here, but I really can't say, I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you with certainty that is a parrot costume. And the most important person here in this lineup of people is this guy right here in the middle, who is wearing a very tall, ornate hat. It's purple and it has some like, looks like gold or silver on it. Has a white collar hanging out here, a purple robe, and this is a patch on the shoulder here. And you can see a couple other people with patches on the shoulder here, right? These people are all together. And so then you find like this group of four, right? It's a family of four, and they're right here in this photograph.
Mhm.
when you look at what they're wearing, they're not wearing like normal clothes. They're wearing some kind of costume. Like this person in here, the son, it looks like a son and a father and a mother. And here's a daughter wearing like a black cape. Like they're obvious. He's wearing some sort of funky hat with a tall like
It
thing on it.
reminds me of a bobby.
Right. That's exactly what I thought, like a bobby. Right. So it's a costume of some kind. And so this was kind of like weirding me out. And so when you zoom in on this guy right here, you can kind of see like a little clearer. This person here looks they're wearing Greco-Roman style robes. You have one person with this tall, funky hat. Here's another one right here, and here's a third one down a little bit further. And you can see the big open collar here, and this one has an open collar here with the white shirt underneath. And it definitely, to me, looked like a guy in purple robes and a patch on the shoulder. And so when I really kind of understood like what was going on here, I realized all these people with arrows above their head are wearing ornate outfits or some kind of costume. And like no one had ever brought this up to me before. And so then you go up to like the grassy knoll and you see like this is from the seconds immediately after the shooting. This you have these kids up here, and this kid has like tassels on his shoulder, and like the inlay of his jacket on the front, it comes all the way down to the bottom.
Almost looks like
And
an
so
Ed
I'm like,
Ranger outfit.
right, is exactly it. I thought it was like a marching band. I'm like,
Mhm.
what is up with this what is going on here? Right. And I'm going to skip a bunch of these pictures here. And then I find this here in the back of the Robert Hughes film. Now, this only took up about an inch in the back of the video itself, of the film itself. But someone's getting arrested back here, and it looked like the Wicked Witch of the West. Like they're wearing some kind of like, look like the witch outfit, right?
Mhm.
That
Yeah,
hat
look
is
at this.
very pronounced too.
Very pronounced, right? A big witch's hat. And I'm like, why are people wearing costumes at the
Yeah,
Kennedy
considering it's
assassination? We got a
November,
parrot,
Halloween was
we got
over.
a witch, right? And so this is kind of a zoom in on it. You can see it a little more pronounced. And I realized that this person here was Clyde Haygood, who was the cop who ran up the knoll a couple minutes after the shooting. When you read his statements and go through what really happened from witnesses and all that, because he ends up lying about it after the fact. All of these cops who actually did stuff had their testimony like force changed, and then Clyde Haygood actually ends up getting in a one-car accident and suffered brain damage, and so he never talked again. But yeah, that's Clive Haygood on the right, and he's arresting what looks like the Wicked Witch of the West. But then I realized that like that's not the Wicked Witch of the West. Like that is some sort of Hasidic Jewish hat, and like this, and that the robe they're wearing is like this. It's a Hasidic Jewish ceremonial robe and hat. So let's go back and take another look at it. Now it makes a little bit more sense, right? And here you have two more Jews in Hasidic garb with white scarves on. And you can tell this, and when you watch the video, it's a little more clear, but they're also wearing these big round Hasidic hats that they wear. So you have all these Jews up back on behind the grassy knoll within seconds of the assassination. Then I realized in the video, when you watch this, these two little spots that I have clear. It doesn't look like people, but they're actually moving, right? And then when you read the statements of Joe Smith, what he did after the assassination, when he runs back in the railroad yards, it became clear to me that this was Joe Smith, and he had a suspect proned out underneath the car. Now I know that Joe Smith took somebody into custody because this is him right here on the right. And he took this person into custody, and he's walking them down. This is the slope of the grassy knoll after the assassination, probably by about 2 or 3 minutes. 2 or 3 minutes after the assassination, he's walking this person down. And I kind of concluded, based on the statements that he made, that and the motion here of this, that this is where Joe Smith took his suspect into custody, and this is where he got arrested. Now, this person went on to be held for 3 weeks. Long after Lee Harvey Oswald was killed, Bill Decker was trying to put charges on this guy, couldn't hold him on anything related to the president, tried putting local charges on him, and after 3 weeks, they had to let this guy go. I have not confirmed his identity, but I have my suspicions. So really, what is going on here is this is a Purim ritual ceremony. And now Purim, when you study the Jewish holidays, Purim is the tale of Esther and a king named Haman. And basically, Haman was going to kill all the Jews. And so Esther and Mordecai, they pray to God, and they get all the Jewish people to fast. And God intervenes, and Haman is killed, and the Jews are saved. So Purim is the ceremony. It's a celebration of the salvation of the Jewish people from Haman. The way I interpret it is the celebration of the preemptive slaughter of their enemies. And so when you look at a modern day Purim ceremony on the left, you've got the same exact thing: the tall hats with the design, the purple robes, the patch on the shoulder, the big white collar. Yeah. So this is a Jewish ritual sacrifice, a symbolic Purim ceremony. And why are they doing a Purim ceremony? Well, because Kennedy is akin to Haman, because Kennedy was going to cut all aid to Israel, and he was going to prevent the Israelis from getting the bomb. And so they believed that this was no different than Haman ordering a decree to kill all the Jews, right? So Kennedy was going to prevent them from getting the bomb, which they believed would ultimately lead to the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. Therefore, the killing of Kennedy was akin to the killing of Haman, the preemptive slaughter of their enemy, which is exactly what they did. Because make no mistake about it, Kennedy was going to shut down that whole fucking state. And we know this going back to what's called the Battle of Letters. The Battle of Letters between Kennedy and Ben-Gurion in May of 1963, where Kennedy is demanding access to the Dimona nuclear reactor in the Negev Desert. Now, the Israelis had been building a nuclear bomb factory since the late 1950s. They were helped by the French. They were helped by the Galen organization out of Argentina. And in 1960, Time magazine publishes an article stating that the Israelis are building nukes. 20, 30 years later, you get Mordecai Vanunu, who smuggled photographs out of the facility in the Negev Desert called Dimona, and they basically published those, and then the whole world knew that the Israelis were in fact building nuclear weapons, and they deny it still to this very day. This is the reason why Kennedy was killed. And when you look back at the timing, the Battle of Letters, where basically Ben-Gurion told Kennedy to go fuck yourself. You're not going to get anybody in to inspect our nuclear reactor. He told him that because he knew the assassination was already in the works, because the Walker shooting happened on April 10th, and the Walker shooting was the shooting at General Edwin Walker's house, which was meant to set up Lee Harvey Oswald as the patsy in the assassination. That happened more than a month before the Battle of Letters, indicating the plot to kill Kennedy was well underway. I put the plot to kill Kennedy as having been finalized somewhere around February of 1963. Because in March of 1963, we have Oswald allegedly ordering the rifle and the handgun to a P.O. box. However, he never ordered the rifle, nor did he order the handgun, because problems with the P.O. box, problems with the money order. It was obviously a false trail leading to Oswald. And that all happened long before the Battle of Letters in May of 1963. So we can definitely say with certainty the plot to kill Kennedy was on for at least 9 or 10 months, probably slightly even longer. I believe that there was a board meeting of Permindex. All that says is in spring of 1963. And I have no doubts that that meeting of Permindex, which I believe was in America in New York City, I believe that was when the finalization of the plans to kill Kennedy were put into place. And then everyone went to go fulfill their roles at that time. The CIA had things to do. The mob had things to do. Even the Israelis had things to do via Jack Ruby, because Jack Ruby was directly connected to Meyer Lansky. The people were like, oh, well, Jack Ruby was a Jew. He couldn't have been in the fucking mob. What a bunch of dummies. So Jack Ruby worked directly for Meyer Lansky. He was connected to all the big mob bosses. He was connected to Giancana in Chicago, and Giancana worked for a guy named Hyman Larner. Hyman Larner was the Jew who controlled the mob in Chicago, and Giancana was a front boss. And so, Jack Ruby was so high up in the mob that he was outside all the bounds of the Sicilians, right? So he would directly do things for Meyer Lansky or Hyman Larner or the Jewish controlling sect of the mob. That is who Jack Ruby worked for. So.
Crazy.
Yeah, I forget where I was
You're
going
on a
with this.
roll here, dude. You mentioned something about the railroad right behind the whole area that this was. This was behind the book.
The book depository. Right?
Yeah. So this railroad, because this was what was interesting when I was looking through this, and I kind of mentioned this to you earlier. I'm obviously not as educated on this stuff as you are, but this Gordon Arnold dude that
he was standing in front of the fence, and he says the bullets went over his head, and then
he
someone
said
came
one
around
went past his ear, which was interesting. And then he goes on, so he's filming, right? He's trying to get like a good vantage point. He thought that the whole situation that he was going to go film was just a parade, but then he finds out later that Kennedy's going to be there, tries to get a good spot to film. He's trying to get a good area, but a CIA agent supposedly flashes his badge at him, says you can't come up here, go somewhere else. He stands near the grassy knoll, from what I understand. A bullet whizzes past him, and then he hits the deck. And a police officer without a hat, which is interesting. Maybe the hat fell off in some chaos or whatever, but a police officer approaches Arnold here and says, "I need your video footage."
Mhm.
And then he goes, that this police officer, according to Arnold, goes to that railroad station and meets up with someone working at the railroad, and then gives him the camera, gives him all the footage, and the guy never gets his footage back. Is that true?
Right. It's possible. No, I mean, we can't say with certainty, but the things he say are they don't conflict with how I've put together the flow of the assassination. So yeah, but there's no real evidence that he was there. It's just that his statements are seemingly in line with what I have put together.
And I'm sure that you've seen this photo, right? This one of it's enhanced.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Yeah, it's
you don't
junk.
think it's real?
No, I know it's not.
Okay, why is that?
Yeah, because I know who the shooters were, and I know where they were, and I know that there was not a police officer in uniform directly behind the fence line. So,
okay.
Yeah. But so let me get back to the ritual aspect. So on the photo on the left of the kids on the grassy knoll, the photo on the right are Jewish children wearing Purim ceremonial outfits. You'll notice the same tassels on the shoulder and the inlay that goes down the front of the outfit. So these lunatic fucking occultists brought their children to see Kennedy get his head blown off, right? They knew he was going to, all the crowd there knew, because they were all Jews who were really, and the way I see it is these guys are not like normal Jews. These are occultist fucking wacko Jews who are digging into like Abrahamic Canaanite religion stuff, right? That's where the overlap between the Egyptian gods and the Canaanite pagan deities and Baal and Set and all that stuff, like all kind of intermingle in this kind of weird Jewish occultists. The way I'd kind of compare these people is like the number of Muslims who are actual jihadists is like so fucking small. It's a fraction of a percent. And I would put the number of these weirdo occultists within Judaism at the same thing, a fraction of a percent. But I can tell you almost with certainty that this was coordinated through Meyer Lansky's rabbi. There's a lot of government FBI documents, particularly in some CIA, on Meyer Lansky's rabbi that I still need to get to. But that would be the connection, because when you go back to like the assassination of Mayor Anton Cermak in 1931, or was it? No, that was 33. Anton Cermak is murdered in Miami in 1933. He's the mayor of Chicago. He was basically had a beef with Al Capone, and then after Al Capone, Frank Nitti, and fundamentally, a hit is put out on him. And while he is with Roosevelt in Miami, the hit is pulled off by a guy named Dave Yaris, who was actually one of the shooters in the Kennedy assassination. Dave Yaris, a young 19-year-old kid who's sent from Chicago to Miami to work the liquor lines for Prohibition. He ends up getting a guy named Zangara, Giuseppe Zangara, to be the patsy in this assassination. And when you really dig through the pictures in that assassination, you'll find these Purim rabbis there also in 1933, 30 fucking years before Kennedy was killed. So yeah, this is not new. This is not an aberrant occurrence. This is modus operandi for these people. And I promise you, there are these Purim rabbis in the Ambassador Hotel with Robert Kennedy. I promise you they're around somewhere around Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. All of these are all conducted in a manner that coincide with Jewish ritual sacrifice. So
now, now I'm going to back this up a many years. That ritual worship of supposed when Moses went up to get the 10 commandments, he comes down, they build the golden calf. Okay. And he's like, oh, you can't be worshiping this and da. What is the correlation? Because I've been thinking about this for probably a month now, since they found these red heifers. Okay. Why are they still so adamant about cow worship? And does that like, maybe I'm just like,
that I know what you're talking about. I really can't comment on that too much, but I'll kind of explain to you how I kind of see the divergence here from the kind of traditional Orthodox Judaism that follows the Torah and these kind of like modern day Jews who follow the Talmud, because there's a big difference, right? So there's a sect, it's about 10% of Jews around the world who are extreme Orthodox, and they fucking hate Israel. They hate the Zionists, and they are very against Talmudic Judaism, right? Because the Torah is good stuff. It's the Ten Commandments, right? It's like don't steal, don't fuck your neighbor's wife, don't. No, it's all that stuff, right? All that. Don't kill people, whatever. So, but that's not the Talmud. So you have Moses who goes up and gets the Ten Commandments, right? And so the Torah eventually comes from the Ten Commandments. Waiting at the base of the mountain, you had like 70 rabbis, and they end up writing all the other shit that has nothing to do with the Torah. It's their interpretations of how to execute the Torah in daily life, and that was called the Sanhedrin. So the Sanhedrin is the original documents that are basically these 70 rabbis' interpretation of the Torah. Okay. And so, but they add, of course, they're humans. And so they add all their own shit to it and all this crazy shit. And that the Sanhedrin over time, after the destruction of the temple and all that stuff, hundreds or thousands of years later, eventually the Sanhedrin gets incorporated into the Babylonian Talmud, which really has nothing to do with the ancient Israelites who, from what I can tell, went extinct in 70 AD. So after 70 AD, what you have is you have a more, how do I say this? I don't want to say enlightened, but the elitist classes of the day who were more Middle Easterner in Egypt and throughout Palestine. They were Middle Easterners. They were not Black Africans, right? They adopted these ways going back to like before the time of Jesus, who wasn't a real person. And then by the time 550 comes around, they've kind of collected this, I think it's 72 total books, including the Sanhedrin and a whole bunch of other stuff. And that eventually becomes the Babylonian Talmud. And when you read through it, it's a fucking book that basically is very anti-Christian. It endorses all kinds of ritual sacrifice. And yeah, I don't know how I got on this tangent, but it's a disgusting fucking book. And when you go and like, one thing I want to connect to modern day, when you read like statements from people like Tal Zaks, who was the head of fucking Moderna, who says his inspiration for creating the vaccine was the Talmud. It's like, what the fuck are you crazy fucking people talking about? So these sicko occultists are still around today running major companies.
Well, they didn't even have the damn virus when they created that vaccine either. They admit that. Moderna specifically. That's the French guy, if I'm not mistaken, right? So yeah, just a weird thing. Cory, you were mentioning something though, and I stepped away briefly, but the idea that everyone at this ritual of JFK being sacrificed was essentially Jewish. Obviously, there's your onlookers that have nothing to do with the ritual, right?
Correct.
But the media and like more mainstream stories about this, they point to figures like this babushka lady, right? Which I mean that kind of makes you think that maybe she was some part of the ritual. Is that just deliberate misdirection?
Yeah, I think so, because like when you look at all the pictures that have been put forth over the years of having been the babushka lady, it's clearly like 4 or 5 different women that they've put forth. So
well, yeah, they say that there's one lady in particular. I forget.
There is one lady in particular, and she's standing on the lawn, and you can see her like taking pictures or filming or whatever. She's never been identified. You can clearly see her face from another film that's taken from up the grassy knoll as she goes running up the steps, and it's like some old woman. Now,
Beverly Oliver.
It's not Beverly Oliver. She's a fucking. She's a liar and an attention whore. She is not the fuck. She would have been 17 at the time, and when you listen to her descriptions or conflicting descriptions over the years of where she was standing, if she was even in Dealey Plaza at all, it's most likely she was standing on Houston Street, not anywhere near the fucking place where she says. Definitely not where the babushka lady is, but yeah, it's really kind of pissed me off to a great degree that so many people have credited her with being the babushka lady when the various photographs that have been put forth as the babushka lady are definitely different women. And the one person who it is definitely in her 60s, if not older. And so
like I said, it's just deliberate misdirection is what it is.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, they put emphasis on things that don't matter, right? Like, I swear to God, if I hear another person say that like James Files or like Malcolm Wallace had anything to do with the assassination, I'm going to fucking lose it. Like this is COINTELPRO. This is FBI Bush? Infiltration. Bush was in Dallas. He was definitely in Dealey Plaza.
He says he
100%.
Wasn't the
No, so
bin
here's the
Laden
thing with
family?
Bush.
Oh, no, never mind. That's 9/11.
We have a letter from Barbara Bush, his wife, who basically admits that they flew a private plane up to fucking Dallas from Houston, that George Bush dropped her off at a beauty salon and she was getting her hair done when Kennedy was killed. About a half an hour after the assassination, so probably about 1 o'clock, George Bush comes and picks her up from the hair salon in Dallas, and they rush to a private airport. Okay. Now, this is probably 1:15-ish, 1:20-ish. Now, this timing of Barbara Bush's story completely coincides with a story involving Redbird Airport, which is a small kind of private airport in Dallas. Barbara Bush describes how they headed back to the small airport. They got on a private plane, which belonged to Mr. Zappo, who was one of the guys who owned the Dallas Morning News, which all checks out. They then had to fly to Love Field, and then they had to return to the airport and then fly back to Love Field. And she describes this because they were dropping people off and picking people up. And this is exactly what's described by the operator at Redbird Airport, how a plane took off, said it was going one direction, ended up going the opposite direction, ended up at Love Field, returned from Love Field, and then took off again. So I'm concluding that the story Barbara Bush tells coincides with the Redbird Airport story, which would make perfect sense. And ultimately, they fly back to Houston on a public commercial plane from Dallas Love Field. So,
dude, the foresight that the Bushes had, though, man, to not implicate themselves in this is wild. I mean, they have like false recollections of the past written down in journals. I know that Bush supposedly also like tried to rat out one of his friends for the killing of JFK. If you remember, I forget.
Yeah, that's the story of James Parrott. It's really kind of, to me, I don't put a lot of, I mean, it's definitely interesting, but it doesn't really answer anything. It just shows that George Bush was trying to create an alibi and deflect attention to someone else. I mean,
so do you think he was a key player? Bush Senior was a key player.
Bush, you got to understand his role in the CIA at the time. He was an oil guy, right? He was a private sector oil guy, and the CIA had a need for private sector oil guys who had access to ports and boats for smuggling, because the CIA is a fucking smuggling operation.
Yeah.
Especially in the 50s, post World War II and 47 when they came about, like those guys, they were using like fucking Disney on Ice and Ice Capades as smuggling operations. I mean, like, people don't understand how vast their network was, and that was basically what it was about. And so when you had a guy like George Bush who could provide ships for international smuggling, who had the ships, who had money, you pull him into the CIA and you get him involved in operations, but he's not out there handling people. He's a money guy. Bush was elite, right? So
yeah, Eastern establishment, right?
Yeah, but see, why was Bush in
Texas?
If that's the case, then why was Bush in Dealey Plaza? If he's just a money guy, why is he there? Because they were all there. It was a fucking spectacle. All of them were there.
Also, they all wanted to make sure that they like wouldn't rat on each other, even though it seemed like Bush allegedly tried to do this. But
there was some of that. But I think it was just they all had to be there for whatever weird, they had to see for themselves.
Yeah. It's like, we all have to be a part of this.
There's a lot of things that went on that were clearly like that, like clearly initiation style, right? Like Jack Valente. So Jack Valente is the shooter on the grassy knoll. And so when you come to understand that and come to understand who Jack Valente is, Jack Valente went on to run Hollywood for fucking 40 years. He became the head of the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America. Jack Valente created the rating system for fucking movies in this country. And he shot Kennedy from the knoll. And I can prove it. And so, see, they kind of hid him in plain sight, right? Let's say any evidence came out that implicated Jack Valente. Oh, Jack Valente, the guy who runs the movies, he shot Kennedy? Ha ha, you're crazy, right? Look at Chuck Barris. Chuck Barris came out and said he was a CIA assassin. He was the fucking host of the Gong Show, right? I have no doubts he was a CIA assassin.
Well, dude, let's go through this. If you don't mind, let's go through this kind of like step by step and really slowly, because this is fascinating to me that the dude that is so influential in Hollywood is actually the gunman here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd never heard this theory, but
he's so much more than the gunman. He's so much more than the gunman. So I'll start with Jack when he was 15 years old. When Jack was 15 years old, 1936, his very first job is working for Humble Oil, owned by Prescott Bush. And he was what was called a hall boy. That's how he started, at least. So he would run memos and he would run mail back and forth, and he just whatever errands people needed.
A hand job here and there, whatever.
I think you're hitting onto something else there. Yes, I think that Jack got passed around because Jack was gay as fuck. Like that's not what the official story says, but when you come to understand who Jack Valenti was, he was gayer than a fucking $3 bill.
I was just guessing, but shit, I nailed that on
So,
the head, huh?
and you got to
Look
think
at
these
you.
guys fuck kids. They traffic in children,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Unfortunately, yeah.
So, but yeah, 15 years old, he goes to work for Humble Oil. He goes to high school in Houston, and then he goes to the University of Texas at Houston. And from there, 1942-ish, he's still working for Humble Oil, and he's going to school at night, but the war breaks out, and so he has to go to World War II, right? So this fucking guy, you can tell he's already got connections by the time he joins the Air Force, right? He's part of the Air Corps. When you really dig into his record, he's allegedly flew 51 bombing missions, and was like a war hero and all this shit. But really, when you dig into where he was during the fucking war, he was stationed in like Arizona, training to be a fucking. He was training to be a pilot, training to do all this stuff, and then he ends up getting discharged before the war's even over in like early 45, right?
Stolen valor.
So when I look at it's stolen valor. Like the fucking guy probably never left America. If anything, he flew to fucking Europe for like a day and came back. But the vast majority of the time, he was allegedly a bombing hero. He was here in America doing what? I think he was doing sniper training for the fucking CIA. Because we have no evidence he flew a plane. Like you can't find any of those records. When you look at where he allegedly was, the bombing group he was allegedly associated with, his name is not listed anywhere.
What makes you lean towards the sniping training? Obviously,
well, because he fucking killed Kennedy and he was a hell of a shot. Plus, I have my suspicions. Okay, so Jack Valenti ultimately is part of the CIA, and that I can prove because of documents. Well, actually, I'll prove it right now. Let me see.
While you're looking for that, one thing I want to mention, because I feel like I'm just interrupting every time, Cory, so it's not my intention.
Fine.
I'm just trying to jump in. Supposedly there's tape recordings analyzed of 4 shots, and a lot of people think that there were only 3 shots that were fired there in the plaza.
But
there's in fact 4. Is there?
It was way more than that. It was at least 6 or 7, could be up to as many as 10.
Really?
They recovered at least 5 bullets. So yeah, they're completely full of shit. When you go through the actual documents, the documents completely contradict what the official story is. Like,
and we wonder why we have conspiracy theories.
You know that what was that, Ghost?
I said, and we wonder why we have conspiracy theorists.
Well, yeah, because we can't get a damn straight answer. I mean, in the 90s, A&E ran a special as well, and they said that a French hit squad was in charge of doing this. That was
okay. Yeah, let me talk about that real quick. So, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about Joe West and his investigation into the Corsicans. And here's the thing. The Corsican stuff is very real. However, the Corsicans were not shooters. The CIA hired killers from all the fuck over the place to come to Texas and just hang out. Like Hank Albarelli wrote a couple great books. Hank died last year, but his last book is called Coup in Dallas. And he identified the Corsican assassins who were in Dealey Plaza and in Dallas.
Those the Frenchies? Day. The French?
Yes. Okay. Yep, the French. But they were not shooters. They were there to muddy the waters. So the CIA is not a bunch of idiots. They understand how investigations work. And like when they had people come in from all over the world. There were at least a dozen mob guys walking around Dealey Plaza. They had the Corsicans. There's rumors of Mexican assassins that had come in. When the FBI goes and does their fucking polling, what possible gunmen were in Dealey Plaza or Dallas that week, they're going to find like 30 of them, right? And so where's their investigation then?
All 30.
All 30, right? So, and what's that going to do? It's going to get them spinning their gears, going nowhere, right?
Because it makes it so that there's so many different possibilities to where you can't settle on one. And so that's why I find this interesting. And I'm not disagreeing with you at all, but I just find it interesting that you feel that 100% that 100%. You know who shot. And this is what I'm very interested to hear.
Yeah,
for sure. So
remember, it all goes back to relationships, right? Relationships are key. Relationships are everything. So Jack Valenti, so he goes off to college and he goes to the war. Something happens during the war, but I don't think he ever actually goes there. He comes back from the war, finishes up at the University of Texas at Houston, and then he applies to Harvard Business School. But he was kind of a shitty student. He was like a B student. So he applies to Harvard Business School and he gets rejected. Well, instead of sending a letter to the dean, he actually flies up to fucking Boston and he goes and meets with this guy in person. And after 3 days, his rejection letter is now an acceptance letter. And not only that, he's put into like the highest honors program that there is at the school, when he got rejected for being a B student in the fucking first place. So who was it in 1948 pulling strings? Or who was it? Actually, this is 46. Who was in Harvard pulling strings, running student organizations with their foot in the door of the intelligence community in 46?
Bush.
Henry Kissinger.
Oh, shit. Close. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing. It is fucking identical. It's really the same thing. So Henry Kissinger is fucking at Harvard Business School, running student organizations, recruiting for the CIA or intelligence in general, because the CIA isn't around yet. But Kissinger is already in those circles by 46. So he pulls by 48 when fucking Valenti graduates from Harvard with a master's degree. Him and Kissinger become lifelong friends after that. That puts Valenti in the upper echelon of global pull in that sphere of influence. Like, it doesn't get any higher than that.
I know Kissinger is Ryan's favorite dude of all time.
He's Kissinger a friend of the show. I was going to say, Cory, do you think pound for pound worst human of all time? Maybe Kissinger? Maybe worse than Hitler even?
Hitler, we're not going to talk about Hitler today, but Hitler is fucking Mahatma Gandhi compared to Kissinger.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I stand behind that. I think he's the worst fucking person of all time. And
quite possibly. Very, very possibly. If ever there was a facilitator of the New World Order, quote unquote, it was him. Going back to like probably in the womb. That guy was probably evil in the fucking womb.
He's an advocate for using nukes, not just having them, but using them.
He's one of those guys who wants there to be 500,000 people in the world controlling everything, and 500,000, and then everybody else is a slave. Like, that's what these people want ultimately.
Wild. But yeah, let's get back to this fella that's in charge of Harvard.
So 48, he graduates Harvard Business School, and he is basically, from then on out, it's really strange because there's no explanation for a lot of his activities. Like, for example, he is put in touch with a guy named Arthur Krim. And Arthur Krim is working in Hollywood with a guy named Lew Wasserman. And Lew Wasserman was running Universal, which at the time, that was when Universal had more power in Hollywood than anybody, right? The MPAA came along later, and Lew Wasserman was in control of Hollywood, and him and Jack Valenti ended up becoming great friends. Well, they put Jack Valenti as the go-between between Hollywood and the government on the film The Manchurian Candidate. Now, allegedly, Valenti has no history in government, and he has no experience in Hollywood. Why would he get this key position? Obviously, because he was already plugged into those intelligence circles. Arthur Krim had a wife named Matilda Krim. Matilda Krim was having an affair with Johnson at the time the USS Liberty was going on. So you can see this kind of closed circle of people. But yeah, so Jack Valenti is getting these jobs doing weird things, like coordinating Hollywood for the government when he supposedly has no experience in either, right? Obviously, he's doing this at the behest of the CIA. And then he opens up his permanent front job, which is Weekly and Valenti, which is a advertising firm down in Houston. And right from the get-go, he starts this in must have been 53, 54. And immediately his clients were like Continental Oil, Humble Oil. He left Humble Oil to open up his own firm, an advertising firm, basically.
Again, that is Prescott Bush's,
right? Okay. And so he, right off the bat, his advertising firm, his advertising agency starts getting the biggest clients in the fucking world, right? It's obvious he is connected in more ways than one, just because of the level of business that he's getting from, starting his own ad agency. He will run that ad agency through the 1950s up until November 22nd, 1963, when on November 22nd, 1963, he goes to work for Johnson in the White House as Johnson's right-hand man. He had been working with Johnson since 56, right? He had helped Johnson with his campaigns and as for like the Senate or House or whatever the fuck Johnson was doing before he was the vice president. He got Kennedy's gig in 1960 doing the advertising and promotion for Kennedy's campaign, right? So Jack Valenti is a key figure in the world of politics post 1956 when he gets in with Lyndon Johnson. All right. Now, keep in mind, he was allegedly in the war. He's definitely plugged into intelligence communities. He went to Harvard. He's directly connected to Henry Kissinger all this entire time. Right. Then when I really start to dig through the Jack Valenti file, it really kind of rocked me, the things that they actually allowed to leak. So let me show you some of this stuff.
And when they show this stuff, I mean, you say yourself, you're surprised. Is he meant to be sort of a scapegoat for people that dig into this? Because obviously,
no, I think what happens is over the years, I think people in modern day who release files from 50 years ago, they don't know what the fuck they're releasing. They just don't. They don't understand. They're like, okay, Jack Valenti worked in the White House, big fucking deal, right? They don't understand the relevance of that to someone like me who understands like timing and the significance of timing of all the different things that he's done, right? So,
well, dude, when there's names being thrown around too, like, you know, the Bush family and these other, you know, Meyer Lansky and all these other things, dude, I haven't fucking ever heard of Jack Valenti myself.
Nobody
I'm fairly proficient when it comes to stuff like this, but
right.
No, like I said, there's levels to this, and I wonder if he's a scapegoat for people that are at a higher level of understanding with how the CIA worked during this era.
I don't think so. I think he was one of the protected ones. I think. See, the Jack Valenti file wasn't released until 2018.
Wow. Okay, didn't know that.
And it was released because of a FOIA from what's the guy's name who does the Black Vault. The Black Vault website. He does hundreds and hundreds of FOIAs every year.
Okay.
He pulled this because it had something to do with the movies, right? He pulled Jack Valenti's file because it had movie stuff in it. And when I saw it, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. Like, this is one of the most priceless files ever. I've probably been able to fill in the redactions on about a third of it. And there's about, I don't know, I'd say 200 to 300 pages that they never released, that they were intentionally withholding. But those just go to show relationships, because Jack Valenti got tied up in some interesting things while he was in the White House and out of the White House. But so December 12th,
John Greenwald.
Yeah, John Greenwald. Yeah.
Okay. So cool.
So December 12th, 63, they're doing background checks on all these people. And so remember, Jack Valenti, his job up until November 22nd was running an advertising firm in Houston. No government job, period. Okay. But December 12th, 63, this is from C.D. Deloach to Mr. Moore. This is an internal document within the FBI to, I believe, CIA. Mr. Moore is CIA, because I can't find a Mr. Moore who's a real name. Walter Jenkins called me from the White House at 12:40. He mentioned that the president planned to move several people in federal agencies over on the White House payroll. Captioned individual is one of these people. Okay. So the captioned individual is Jack Valenti, and he had to be moved from a federal agency over onto the White House payroll. Well, what fucking federal agency could he possibly be working for if he was just running a goddamn advertising firm in Houston? There's only one, the CIA.
Yeah, you'd think the CIA for sure, but yeah, it's just yeah, Ghost. That's wild, dude. I don't know if you caught that whole thing, man, but you know, this first paragraph of this whole thing right here is
I apologize. I did not. I had to break up a dog fight.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
But you understand the significance of this document, right? I mean, it's basically them telling them that Jack Valenti's in a fucking federal agency. And the only federal agency it could have possibly been was a CIA, especially when you look at his history with Kissinger and having been in the military and all this stuff and him getting into Harvard. Like, it's obvious he's intelligence, and there's only one intelligence agency really in this country that does anything valid, and that's the CIA. So
is it fair to be skeptical of everyone that graduates from Yale and Harvard and places like this?
Yes.
That's what I thought, man. It's so difficult to get into these places. They don't just take intelligent people. It seems like you have to be connected, and if you're going to actually graduate from these places,
I think these are just filtration mechanisms. They're recruiting and filtration mechanisms. That's it.
Very well said. Yeah, for sure.
And so then when you further dig into Jack Valenti, like the FBI file, man, I'm telling you, everybody needs to read this thing. Like, I've read it like a lot, and there's still parts of it I can't figure out, but it's just so much It's the gift that keeps on giving. So FBI probed Hollywood's Jack Valenti for mob ties because he was born into two mob families. He was born into the Valenti family, which was connected to like Umberto Valenti, who was called the Ghost back in the 20s. He's related to a guy named Andrea Valenti out of Tampa. And that's important because Andrea Valenti was one of the other people arrested after the assassination of Mayor Anton Cermak in Miami. And that was coordinated through Trafficante Sr. And Jack Valenti, I believe, was controlled through his mob ties under Trafficante out of Tampa, Trafficante Jr. Because I have some documents that indicate Trafficante introduced a hitman named, quote unquote, Max to Frank Sturgis, and that Max went to No Name Key and trained in doing sniper stuff with Frank Sturgis. Then Otto Scorzani, who was clearly involved, definitely in Dealey Plaza, thanks to Hank Albarelli's work, proved that he was in Dallas at the time of the assassination. He stated that the Grassy Knoll shooter went by two names, Max and Zed. And so for that to me was too big of a coincidence. Max as the Grassy Knoll shooter, also the name of the assassin who went and trained with Sturgis down in No Name Key. To me, this isn't really rocket science. This is just how you put together a case, you know. And I was a cop for almost 10 fucking years. I've investigated thousands of cases, interviewed thousands of witnesses. I know how to put together a case. And I think that's kind of what separates my research from everyone else's, that like I approach it like a cop and I don't look at it like
it's said that earlier, dude. That's fucking very
I don't think it's you know, when you understand history and you can really come to understand the CIA, the case I put together makes perfect sense, and it completely flows. I mean, I've identified all the shooters, their handlers, where they were staying, like who killed JD Tippett. Like I cracked the whole fucking case.
So you went from being like 90% credible to like 110, dude. You should have mentioned the cop factor earlier.
Yeah, I suppressed that a lot because I mean, honestly, it's the cops are the most corrupt fucking people in this country. They are corrupt on a daily basis and things that they wouldn't even understand. But I learned a lot. So
wow, interesting, man. Yeah, well, it's getting more and more interesting, dude. What else we got?
All right, so Jack Valenti is born to two mob families: the Valenti family and the DeGeorge family. The DeGeorge family was Houston based, the Valenti family, like I said, out of Tampa. So yeah, he was definitely still connected to all kinds of fucking mob people because the mob, remember, in 63, the mob, the CIA, and the Israelis, one organization. Yeah, I think he had some homosexual blackmail on LBJ. I don't want to go too much into this, but the FBI freaked out trying to find some pictures that had Valenti and LBJ in them. And it was all connected to a photographer out in California. And he was a flaming homosexual. And so, yeah, it wouldn't even have been in the file if they weren't inappropriate. And therefore, I think that those were used to blackmail LBJ, because ultimately I think that Johnson was, presidents are puppets, right? So I believe that his direct handler in the White House was Valenti himself, who was working for the CIA, who ultimately takes their orders from Tel Aviv. That's kind of how that infrastructure works.
This is a time when being homosexual is looked at as being like basically a pedophile almost. I mean, like,
for sure.
Yeah, it's big time. Same thing with J. Edgar Hoover, right? I mean, he was like walking around his house naked, wearing high heels and shit.
Yeah, the mob had blackmail on him. Like they allegedly had film of him blowing fucking Clyde Tolson, who was his number 2 guy, because these guys would have freaky orgy parties, man. Like you could sneak a camera in a lot easier today than you could back then, right? A camera was like fucking huge, right?
Yeah, dude, that's wild, man. And then now today, it's just like, I mean, there's nothing. Even cheating on a spouse isn't looked at that poorly at that level. It's all kids stuff, and this is
right because we've had because there's been a moral degradation of the country intentionally going back since way before Kennedy.
Yes, absolutely, man. Wild. Okay.
So like I'm not a Catholic or a Christian. I'm not a religious person whatsoever. But man, let me tell you, when I see the alternative, I will gladly take a Christian society over a fucking woke society any goddamn day of the week.
Thank you. I say that all the time. I'm agnostic myself, but I fully agree, dude. I like you mentioned something about Jesus not being real earlier. I believe in Jesus myself. I don't hate on you for thinking that or feeling that way, but I definitely lean towards that idea of a Christian society, just because these people that you're talking about here fully go against that. That's why I'm into it.
Yeah. I'm all for like for a while when the woke left wasn't crazy, when they were just like the normal lefties 10 years ago, right? That was where most people stood. And so the Christians look like ridiculous and they look crazy. But now, like when you see the results of this fucking mentality that people have in this woke culture and how left, basically it's social communism has been infiltrating our fucking country. It's like, Jesus Christ, Literally, Jesus Christ, give me some Christians running the fucking show again.
Yeah.
You know, I'll gladly swap abortion for like some of this crazy fucking, you know, pedophile shit with trannies in our schools and stuff, right? Like
Yep.
any day of the fucking week. So
100%.
hell, I might even start going to church to find me a nice, good Christian woman.
There you go, dude. Hey, they'll fuck you like a fucking crazy. You know, they like this stuff.
And they're really good cookers or they're really good bakers.
That's usually 9 times out of 10. That's the case.
Yeah. And if they got an income, that's even better.
Yes.
And they usually do because they're not lazy. So this is the whole thing. And they
okay,
shave their pits, you know.
That's good. So so we got this. This is like showing that basically after he gets out of fucking working for Lyndon Johnson, he gets out in 66, right? He immediately is put on the payroll, put on another payroll in Washington, D.C., right? That lasted for over 3 years till 69, but he worked 0 days, right? So he's put on a government fucking payroll, given some level of something title, right? Probably collected a paycheck, but he never showed up to work. Not once.
Where your tax dollars go.
Right, exactly.
I need to
Let's
find
see
a
what else
job
we
like
got
that.
here. Okay, so Valenti in 1966, he's basically forced out of the White House, and no one else has really ever studied Valenti like I have. So I kind of have more of an idea of what was going on with him in the White House than pretty much anybody alive. I've spent pretty much 2 years like solely on Valenti and trying to figure out his connections to everything else. And so basically he's forced out because he has a brother-in-law named Vincent Caltagirone Jr. And I'm going to make a really long story really fucking short. Vincent Caltagirone Jr. is the short tramp in Dealey Plaza, and he's also the real Raul who set up James Earl Ray in the Martin Luther King assassination. Okay, so I identified Vincent Caltagirone Jr. as Jack Valenti's former brother-in-law up until 1961. Okay, so we have Jack Valenti, the shooter on the grassy knoll, and his former brother-in-law is the short tramp who was later arrested in Dealey Plaza. That tells me that they were still working together, even though they were no longer family. But basically, Vincent is pulled into a murder investigation in Miami. The investigation surrounding a guy named Mosler. And Mosler is a rich dude, probably a homosexual. But he's married to a super younger woman. Like he's in his 60s and he's married to like a 20-year-old, right? This hot chick, and she has a boyfriend on the side, right? So this is like love triangle going on. The fucking old guy ends up getting murdered, and then Vincent Caltagirone Jr. is actually that guy's roommate at the time that he's murdered. And this was like major news. This was like the O.J. Simpson case of the 1960s. And so when this came out, it came out that Vincent Caltagirone was the former brother-in-law of Jack Valenti. Jack Valenti fucking up and dipped out of the White House so goddamn fast. And so that's the connection I make there, because Vincent Caltagirone got outed as being involved in this other murder. Jack Valenti had to get the fuck out of Dodge. And plus they were catching up to him with a lot of the homosexual stuff. There were allegations that he had been involved with numerous people in previous administrations and the current administration homosexually. And so he's like, yeah, I'm the fuck out. So right about that time, Lou Wasserman, who's working for Universal Studios, who was the head of Hollywood, he's getting ready to move on to do something else. And the Motion Picture Association of America is kind of coming to prominence as being the regulatory agency over Hollywood. And so Valenti moves immediately into that position. And so, yeah, that's the story of Valenti in a nutshell.
Wild,
when you let me see what else I got so much on him, I don't even want to get into most of it. It'll go off on tangents for like years.
Yeah, whatever you feel is the most important here. It just if we're talking about the JFK assassination, I think the most important dude in this is the person that pulled the trigger.
Right. So let's cover some of this. Let's cover some of this stuff. This is, to me, we'll cover how the shooter on the grassy knoll like did what he did and how he got away and all this stuff. So basically, you have the Secret Service car, and the Secret Service car were actively involved in the assassination. They were not just bystanders. So when the Secret Service car pulls into Dealey Plaza, it has 10 men on it. You can see 8 of them here. 2 of them are kind of out of sight. The driver and the front passenger are Samuel Kinney and Emery Roberts. There's no question these are the 10 men on the car at the time. Clint Hill is number 1. William McIntyre, number 2. Then you got John Reedy, Paul Landis, Kenny O'Donnell, Dave Powers, George Hickey, and Glenn Bennett. Okay. 10 men pulled into Dealey Plaza on the Secret Service car. By the time the Secret Service car leaves Dealey Plaza, it should only have 8 people on it because Dave Powers, assistant to the president, he gets out of the car in Dealey Plaza. That's a fact. Clint Hill, we all know, runs to the limousine. So he's not in the limousine. He's not in the Secret Service car anymore. That's a fact. So the 10 men that entered, 2 men leave. We're down to 8 men on the Secret Service car. Okay? Remember this. This should only be 8 men on the Secret Service car.
Okay.
So Kennedy is shot. Clint Hill runs to the limousine. You'll see the car in front of him. The car in front of them is the lead car. It's got Decker and 4 Sorrells and another Secret Service guy in it, right? Chief Curry, I think. And so it's braking, and you can see it's kind of pulled over to the left. Well, what it eventually does is it goes to the left and allows the president's limo to shoot past it. However, when you look at some of these other pictures of them as they're pulling out of Dealey Plaza, you'll see that like the limousine is going around the lead car here. And then this is the McIntyre photo. You'll see that the lead car is hopping around the limousine. So they're doing like this game of leapfrog between the triple underpass and the next overpass at the Stemmons Freeway, right? So why are they doing this? Well, when you let me see, where do I want to take this one? All right, let's just start here. So this is what's called the McIntyre photo. This is McIntyre photo number 1. When you're coming up into Dealey Plaza, you'll see you got 2 guys on the side of the Secret Service car, John D. Jack Reedy and Paul Landis, okay? They're both the same height. They're about 6 foot tall, 5'11", 6 foot tall. They're both fucking white guys, okay? Paul Landis has this like rounded haircut here, and John D. Jack Reedy has this kind of like wavy, receding hairline here. Well, when you read their statements of what happened in Dealey Plaza, John D. Jack Reedy claims that he runs to the president's limousine, although that's never seen in the Zapruder film. He claims that he is signaled back by Emery Roberts, who was the special agent in charge in the front right passenger seat. So he then, according to John D. Jack Reedy, he hops in the front seat and sits in the front seat all the way to Parkland. But he fucking lied. He did not hop in the front seat. He hopped in the second seat, the second row of seats, as did Paul Landis. Paul Landis fucking lied about what he did in Dealey Plaza as well. He claims that he was on the passenger side of the limousine of the Secret Service car all the way past the triple underpass, and that they were on their way past the Stemmons Freeway before somebody pulled his arm and he hops into the second row of seats. He fucking lied also. Right after this photograph is taken, probably within a couple seconds, both of these men will enter the second row of seats in contradiction to both of their fucking statements, okay? So you see these 2 guys here. Let me see if I have another picture of them. John D. Jack Reedy and Paul Landis, right? Say another picture of the same guys, 6 foot tall, the rounded haircut and the shaggy haircut, okay? So neither of these could be confused for a guy with a flat top. So let's go back to the McIntyre photo. The McIntyre photo, this is probably 4 or 5 seconds after this last photo I showed you, right? With the 2 guys standing on the passenger side running boards. So you have the lead car is now leaping around the limousine, all right? But let's zoom in on the limousine and see what we can see here. And if you guys disagree with me or think that I'm crazy in any way, please point it out to me. But I can't seem to figure out how I'm crazy here. So when you zoom in, you'll see that now, instead of 2 guys on the side of the Secret Service car, there's only 1, and this guy has a flat top here, okay? So it's not these guys. It's not John D. Jack Reedy or Paul E. Landis, right? It's somebody else. You can see it here. 1 person, not 2.
Okay.
So you have 1 person here, and this person here in the back is what the hell was his name? That was George Hickey. Okay, so George Hickey is in the back seat. He's got the AR-15 that was in the Secret Service car, right? He pulls it out after Kennedy shot. He didn't shoot Kennedy, even though there's this whole fucking book written about how he did. It's ridiculous. So now we have what appears to me to be a person standing in the back of the president's limousine. And now, how did I come to that conclusion? Well, this is definitely a person. Here's a black jacket, black hat, and they're not in or on the side of the Secret Service car because they're holding an item. This is their arm going down. they're holding this object at a 45-degree angle. And whatever this object is at a long 45-degree angle, it is in front of the windshield of the Secret Service car. You can clearly see how it's blocking the image here, right? It's blocking the view of the Secret Service car. It's clearly somebody holding something in front of the Secret Service car. And where could they possibly be standing? Nowhere but the back of the president's limousine. On the right here, some people would say, well, that's Clint Hill getting on the back of the limo. No, it's not, because this is Clint Hill's head right here on the side of the car, right? So you have the two drivers, you have the driver, the passenger, and then you have behind him, you have Clint Hill's head hanging over the side of the car because he is on top of Jackie, probably in front of the back seats on the floorboards, right? So the president probably fell on the floor. She's on top of the president, and then Clint Hill is on top of her. Like, and he's keeping her from seeing what's happening. But this to me appears to be a man in the back seat of the president's limousine standing holding a fucking rifle. And I've run this by 100 people, and I'm just waiting for someone to explain to me something other than what I'm trying to say, because I can't see any other possible explanation for what that is. And this will make much more sense in a moment when I get to the next several frames. So here we have John D. Jack Reedy and Paul Landis, two people on the side of the Secret Service car. We come to this photo, the McIntyre photo. Now we only have one person there on the side of the Secret Service car, and it looks like they have a flat top, right? But in McIntyre photo number 2, we're back to having two people on the side of the Secret Service car. And more
there's
importantly,
a flat top guy on the right now.
There's a flat top guy on the right now. Exactamundo. Now, who is the fucking flat top guy on the right? The split second I saw this image, I realized the man on the left is Jack Valente, and the man on the right is David Morales, the one and only David Morales, whose name has been lingering around the Kennedy assassination lore for 50 fucking years. And then when you go, this is McIntyre photo number 2. When you go back to McIntyre photo number 2, remember there's only supposed to be 8 people in the fucking car. There are 10 people in the car again. 10.
So they jumped in and when they passed that bridge?
Yeah, how did they do this?
I believe
so quick.
So this is what I believe happened, and there's some incidental evidence to support this. Jack Valente, I believe, shoots the president from the area of the concrete right next to on top of the grassy knoll between the overpass and the fence. He then goes over the top of the overpass and comes down right here, slides down the side of the grassy knoll. We know that David Morales had to have gotten into the car sometime in Dealey Plaza, and he had to have done it shortly after Dave Powers exited the vehicle, because he is already on the car by the time it passed the underpass, right? He's already there. So he had to have been picked up in Dealey Plaza. Now, we have a witness named Tom Tilson. Tom Tilson states that he happens to be a Dallas cop, but he was off duty and he was in Dealey Plaza allegedly. His statements are a little interesting, but he says he saw a man with a rifle slide down the other side of a knoll before fleeing in a black car. Now, that would completely correspond with Jack Valente's coming down the other side of the knoll and then hopping into the president's car. So here, this is allegedly Clint Hill on the back of the president's limousine as it passed through the triple underpass. But the picture, I think, is some tampering going on here. This picture doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I can't seem to corroborate this picture with the motions of the lead car. So, but when I come back to this photograph here, ultimately, I believe that Jack Valente entered the back of the president's vehicle. He was picked up by Greer. There's another witness who says that the president's limousine stopped on the other side of the overpass. So, but it's not corroborated, right? So it's not, you can't really say it definitely happened, but all of these little pieces of the puzzle seem to make sense. But for me, it all comes back to the fact that you had 10 men on the Secret Service car enter Dealey Plaza. 2 of them exited. And now here we have 10 men once again on the Secret Service car. And I have studied Jack Valente for years. The instant I saw this photo, I recognized Jack Valente on the left and David Morales on the right. And that's in addition to the 8 men who were already in the Secret Service car. This makes perfect sense. And why else does it make perfect sense? Because from here, they go where? Parkland Hospital. Jack Valente will then place himself in the basement of Parkland Hospital, where he is grabbed by Cliff Carter to go meet with LBJ. What happened in the basement of Parkland Hospital?
I have no idea.
Jones?
They found the magic bullet.
Wow.
Oh,
Jack Valente was in the position to plant the magic bullet, especially since he would have had the bullets on him since he was the shooter. Now, the bullets that were planted were not from a man like Carcano. When you look at the statements that were given by Daryl Tomlinson and O.P. Wright, the two guys who worked at Parkland, both of them rejected the Carcano bullet, which has come to be known as CE 399, Commission's Exhibit 399, right? The magic bullet. They rejected that as having been the bullet they recovered in Parkland. Both of them stated that the bullet they found in Parkland had a pointed tip like a 303, like a 303 round. O.P. Wright actually was also a hunter, and he actually had a 303 round with him when Josiah Thompson, who wrote 6 Seconds in Dallas, went to go meet with him. And he said, yeah, it was not the bullet they're trying to get me to say it was. It looked just like this, and he pulled out a pointed tip 303. Now, where else in the story does a pointed tip 303 rear its ugly head? There's a couple places, but the one that's most important is that they do not really highlight this information, but most people don't realize this. Buell Frazier, who allegedly worked with Oswald at the book depository, was arrested on November 22nd, 1963. When he was arrested at his house, they seized from him an Enfield 303 and a whole bunch of 303 ammunition. Okay, so the magic bullet is a bullshit swap by the FBI. It was the original bullet that was found at Parkland by Daryl Thompson and O.P. Wright was a pointed tip 303 bullet planted by Jack Valente. And why was it planted? Because they were going to set up Buell Frazier as a second patsy. But it turns out they didn't need him as a second patsy because all the shit with Oswald went according to plan. Oswald went and waited in the goddamn theater like he was told to by his handler, and they went in and arrested him. They had no need to set up a second patsy. The only screw up was when they ended up trying to kill Oswald in the fucking theater, which was they were supposed to do, and he lived, right? So that's when Jack Ruby makes a call to a guy named Al Gruber. Al Gruber was the right-hand man of Mickey Cohen in L.A., right? So now we're back to L.A., the Jewish mobsters in L.A., right? Reuven Daphne in 46, meeting with Bugsy Siegel. Bugsy Siegel, also out there, Jewish mobster Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen's personal fucking rabbi was Menachem Begin. Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir would hang out with Mickey Cohen in Los Angeles. And who was Mickey Cohen's right-hand man? Al Gruber. Al Gruber was the first call Jack Ruby made after Oswald gets fucking arrested. That was the moment that Al Gruber gave Jack Ruby the order to kill Oswald, which obviously came from the Jewish interests in the mob. So that's how I put all that together. And so, yeah, it's not really fucking rocket science. I mean, you just have to understand how to approach evidence, how to interpret evidence, how to find discrepancies in witness statements. I mean, I did this for a decade every day. I had people lie to my fucking face for a living for almost 10 years, right? Like when people lie to you every fucking day, you get to spot a lie a fucking mile away. So when I went and started analyzing shit in this case, a lot of it just fell into place for me. And I'm looking at it going, holy shit, there's idiots on forums who are still debating over this stuff, and they're getting spun in circles by COINTELPRO FBI agents. I promise you. COINTELPRO is the reason this hasn't been solved.
Well, yeah, man, like I said, there's so many different possible outcomes. And this one, I mean, this is the hardest one to reach. You say it's not rocket science, but I mean, again,
it was brutally painful. I mean, honestly, I put in 12-hour fucking days, 7 days a week for 3+ years. I mean, it was my whole life. I run a podcast publishing company, and so I make all my money on podcasting. So for me to be able to spend most of my time on research I had the ability to do it, and so I did it. I had to know what the fuck happened, and now I sleep very well at night knowing pretty much exactly what happened. The things I'm writing my book. I've got about 10 chapters finished. I'll be done, and hopefully it'll be on sale in January. I'm really itching to get done because it's like, despite all the things that I know and all the solutions I've come up with and everything I've come to figure out about it, I still only understand about a third of how this thing was pulled off. The really complex. The really deep stuff, man. I got to get more into the FBI and the Secret Service and their connections to a guy named Sam Bloom in Dallas, because Sam Bloom was major string puller and a kind of a nexus point between the Dallas cops, the CIA, the FBI, and the international Jews, right? Like Sam Bloom was a connection through the Daltex building, partnered with a guy named Charles and Edgar Bronfman. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bronfmans at all. The Bronfmans are like longtime human traffickers, and they were connected to a bank called the Banque de Crédit International with a guy named Tibor Rosenbaum. And that's where that was. Tibor Rosenbaum was the one doing the fucking financial funding for CMC and Permindex. So like all these connections meet in Dallas. Like all and it all leads back to Israel, right? And then Dimona nuclear reactor. That's what it's all about. Like people say, oh, Vietnam and all this shit. Kennedy and McNamara just spent $6 billion on fucking helicopters and fighter planes. Kennedy was not pulling out of Vietnam, period. So whatever the fucking conspiracy nut fucking spinsters want to, put on that, like there was no way Vietnam was coming to an end. It wasn't about the goddamn Federal Reserve. It was all about nukes, the most important thing in the world, an immovable object and an unstoppable force. And that's what Kennedy assassination was. So, wow. But no one ever talks about Israel, and no one ever talks about Israel and the assassination. No one ever talks about the Israeli influence on the mob, the Israeli control of the CIA. Like when people come to understand Zionism, Jesus Christ, you come to realize that Hitler warned us about this 100 years ago. Mein Kampf warned us about this fucking Jewish conspiracy to take over the world, and they have. It's a difficult conversation for most people to have, but it's one that has to happen.
You see what happened to, I'll bring it up again. You see what happened to Kanye. He obviously doesn't know as much as he is trying to articulate, but it's one of those basic conversations you have, and the next thing you know, you're blacklisted. You're called an anti-Semite.
And remember, this goes back to Herzl and his understanding of the fact that there were two distinct classes of Jews, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not both of them that we have an issue with. It's the fact that one is more sympathetic to the other, right, than we would like. But ultimately, if we could really get across to the vast majority of Jews out there that there really is a sect within you who's destroying the fucking world, they would be the most powerful ally in the wars to come. Because trust me, this will be a major theme in any social conflicts we have moving forward.
Well, that's what makes it kind of tough is when, and this is intentional, I think, but when there's people out there that are saying like Jews are running the world and all this shit, that's what makes it tough. Because as a, I don't really know any Jews, to be honest, but I would imagine that like a low income Jewish person would be like, fuck the people that say I run the world.
Right.
Runs the world. I'm going to side with my people, the Jews, whether, there's some rich ones out there or not, and it's provable that there is. But yeah, man, it's we got to try and stop painting with a broad brush. And maybe we could get what you're saying, Cory. We could get some allies in that, Jewish community that would be like, yeah, you're making us all look like pieces of shit by doing this stuff. But yeah, man, it takes a lot of effort to get that shit out, man. That's fucking wild information that you've come across, dude. Very interesting.
Yeah. I know like I said, the hour that you broke a little bit of it down that I heard, I was just like, holy shit. And
we haven't even gotten to the Holocaust yet, which we're not going to touch on today, but that's a whole nother fucking crock of bullshit that has shaped the world. You know what I mean? God,
maybe we could do a Holocaust episode in the future.
Yeah, I'm definitely down. I'm definitely down to do that. Once I finish my Kennedy book, that's going to be my next book. I'm tired of hearing about so much nonsense. Like when people really understand what happened, the totality of World War II, God, the things that are said about the fucking Germans just straight up aren't true, And I feel bad for the modern day German people who have been basically fucking castrated by society over the last 60, 70 fucking years. Really, it's travesty. But yeah, nothing that everyone's ever heard about World War II is true. None of it, not the causes, not the fucking outcomes, nothing. So yeah, we'll definitely have to do a show on that.
Yeah.
Interesting, man. Ghost, I don't know if you had anything else, but I was going to see if Cory, if we left anything out, if there's any other people, maybe if there's not, we could run through a list of these significant people, very, very significant. I know that there's many different tiers of like significance when it comes to these people, but
yeah,
like the fella that you mentioned that runs Hollywood, all these different people that are like A level, like you have to know these names if you're trying to research Kennedy.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell you, it starts at David Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel. It started with Ben-Gurion, and then from there down to Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir and Yitzhak Rabin, the three functioning heads of the Mossad at the time. From there, that fucking filters down to Meyer Lansky, right? Once you get to Meyer Lansky, you got all the mob connections, right? So that's really the nexus of this thing. And then you have like the operational intelligence of Reinhard Gehlen, which is a whole nother wing of the assassination that I need to get to. Right, Reinhard Gehlen definitely played a role in the. I would assume Reinhard Gehlen played a role in the actual like looking at a map and photographs and being like the shooter goes here and one shooter goes there and one will go here. That I believe the physical architect was Reinhard Gehlen, but I have a ton of work to do on him. I mean, I have years of research left to do on him. And then like from the money side, it filters down to like George Mendel, aka George Mantello, and from there to Tibor Rosenbaum and the Banque de Crédit International, which to handle all the financing, and then Louis Bloomfield, who was the head of CMC out of Montreal. And then Louis Bloomfield directly connects to Clay Shaw, David Ferry, and all the guys, Sergio Arcacha Smith, all the New Orleans guys. And then the New Orleans teams were half the shooters, right? So the shooter in the book depository, there was really three. There was Lauren Hall and Lawrence Howard on the 6th floor. And then on the roof, you had a guy named Sergio Arcacha Smith. The shooter at the Daltex building was a guy named Emilio Santana, who was kind of like a partner with Sergio Arcacha Smith. All of these guys are all New Orleans guys associated with David Ferry. Then you have like Danny Green, right? The Irishman, the infamous Irishman who went to war with the Cleveland mob. I put him behind the pergola, and I put him as the tall tramp in Dealey Plaza. That really, do you want to understand how Danny Green's involved? You got to study Danny Green. Like, got to take a break from the assassination, and you got to study the Cleveland mob. What was going on in the Cleveland mob in the 50s and 60s, right? That will lead you to Danny Green and his involvement with James Licavoli, and then with the Genovese family in New York, how Danny Green worked the fucking trains up there. And then you'll see that the assassination happens, and then Danny Green has this meteoric rise to power within the fucking Cleveland mob, takes over the Longshoresman Union in late 63. Right, almost right after the assassination. So he was rewarded. And then he fucking looks identical to the guy who was in the tall tramp. So, again, we can talk. I can show you pictures of the tramps if you want. That took me a long time to figure out. But when you come to figure out who the tramps are, it was Vincent Caltagirone Jr., who was Jack Valenti's former brother-in-law, Danny Green, the tall tramp, and the old tramp is Leo Masseri, who was Danny Green's boss, otherwise known as Leo Lips Masseri. So,
who is the guy that you mentioned in charge of Hollywood again, just for clarity?
Jack Valenti.
Jack Valenti. Okay. And this may be the most basic question. I don't know if you were trying to pull up photos of the tramps, but for clarity and hopefully this isn't a stupid question, but why Lee Harvey Oswald?
That's a whole nother can of worms.
Briefly,
and as far as how the assassination actually went down, Oswald is like irrelevant. Like, I don't even believe Oswald worked at the book depository. So
do you think
when you study Oswald,
MK Ultra to maybe be programmed to be there and not know that?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
Nah. There was some hypnotism shit going on for sure in Dallas and New Orleans surrounding like Bill DeMar, who was a guy who was a hypnotist working for Jack Ruby. And then you have like David Ferry, who was a hypnotist who like was hypnotizing his Civil Air Patrol kids so he could fuck them. I mean, like he was a fucking sick guy, but there was some of this hypnotism stuff going on. But I haven't. The connections to MK Ultra really are they're there, but they're somewhat distant. I mean, you have like the mental institution at Jackson, Louisiana, and then you have like Angola Prison in Atlanta. Those were hotspots for MK Ultra experimentation, and they have overlap into Kennedy. But I haven't found any major like MK Ultra direct, participant stuff. I think the reason for like movies like that tip their hand to things like MK Ultra, like the Manchurian Candidate, they're so when you uncover the government really doing that stuff, they can just go, you watch too many movies, and the conversation's over, right?
Well,
like plain and simple. They tell us, and
with all these movies coming out, foreshadowing or predicting, or like now there's supposedly these asteroids, that were hidden by the glare of the sun that now we're seeing. And what was it? A year and a half, 2 years ago, the movie Don't Look Up was coming out. Like they foreshadow some of this stupid shit, and you're like, oh, that was just a movie. Come on.
Right. Like that they will tell us everything they're going to do. And then say, you just watch too many movies. And then literally the conversation's over and it works. I mean, this is all intelligence tactics.
And then real quick, Cory, I don't know if we're trying to wrap up or anything, but I was just curious. The reason I ask about Oswald, what, again, I don't want to like pry or be too, basic here with this, but just why is he involved in this at all? All
right, so
handlers.
I think it was just opportunity. So basically, when you go back and study Oswald, you will find that starting around 1947, when he was about 12 years old, or even younger than that, he must have been 8. He was born in 39, so yeah, 40. He's about 8 or 9 years old. There were, no joke, a duplicate family with a Lee Harvey Oswald and a mother named Marguerite Oswald, who basically shadowed each other for many, many years, like 10, 15 years. And this was uncovered by a guy named John Armstrong. And
What do you mean by shadow? I'm sorry.
So we know with absolute certainty that Lee Harvey Oswald went to PS 44 in Manhattan, okay, from like 51 to 52 when he was up in New York. But we also have contradictory school records for Lee Harvey Oswald, the same exact years at a different school out in Queens.
Dude, that's okay.
Yeah. So when you look into descriptions of Oswald, that's not the only place. Like there was a Stripling Junior High School in Fort Worth. They fucked up in 1953-54 school year because Oswald is registered at having been at Beauregard Junior High School in New Orleans. But for the first 6 weeks of that school year, he was simultaneously attending Stripling in Fort Worth. And so we have people who knew Oswald at both places. Okay, so there's weird gaps in there's weird overlaps in some of the places where Oswald allegedly lived, addresses. When you really take a long, hard look at Oswald's life, you will find from 47 all the way until 1959 when he goes off into the Marines, that there seemingly is another child named Lee Harvey Oswald, fucking who looks very similar to him, who is not him, that has different descriptions by different teachers, different locations. Then when you start to study Oswald in the Marines, you'll find that there's duplicate records of another Oswald in the Marines as well. Very fucking strange stuff.
Do you think he was picked as a or both of these picked
groomed
as a kid
almost?
Groomed.
Yeah.
To be used for something in the future.
Definitely. So Robert Lee Oswald is allegedly Oswald's father, but there's no evidence of that. There's no proof that his dad is who they say he is. His father most certainly was Central Intelligence Agency and allegedly died in 39, or he was intelligence, not CIA, but whatever the fuck they had back in 39. He allegedly died. And so we don't know anything about him, but his brother Robert Oswald, he has another brother named Robert, and he has another brother named John Pick, who's a half brother. Marguerite Oswald and Robert Oswald's IRS stuff, his taxes, they're all classified, like never have been released, and that's because they were fucking obviously working with the Central Intelligence Agency the whole time. The vast majority of the information the FBI was able to dig up on Marguerite Oswald came from the CIA, so obviously they're involved in some kind of program. There's little indicators on what they were up to, but let me break it down for you real simple. Like after World War II, I believe that they took a child from an Eastern Bloc country, possibly was one of the kids from a concentration camp, right? Raised him in America, starting at a young age, 7, 8 years old. Raised him as Lee Harvey Oswald. And why would they do this? Why would they raise a duplicate child under the same name?
Just have a fake shell of a person out there.
To have a fake shell of a person. And why would they be doing this during the Cold War? Obviously, to get a spy into the Soviet fucking Union, right? This is to me, this is basic spy tactics, right? This is not crazy shit when you come to understand the intelligence agencies just want to get some motherfuckers into the Soviet Union, right? So you raise a duplicate kid, you have him false defect, and then one day, if something pops up and they need him to go do some super secret spy stuff in the Soviet Union, he can just disappear, right? And then when the Soviets go, hey, where's Lee Harvey Oswald? The CIA can be like, we have Lee Harvey Oswald here in America. What are you talking about? Right? And then the spy who, this is another thing that's interesting. John Armstrong kind of had the notion that this duplicate Oswald was from a country that was a native Russian speaker, right? He was a native Russian speaker. And then when people met Oswald, who said he spoke Russian, who knew Russian, said he spoke like perfect. They thought he was Russian because he spoke so well, right? But we also know that we have guys in the Marines who allegedly went to the Marines with Oswald who said that motherfucker didn't speak Russian. He never spoke anything. He just wanted to go chase girls and drink beer. But there are other Marines who are like, no, he never drank beer. He didn't chase any girls. He just stayed home and read Russian fucking magazines, right? So you have descriptions of two different people. And this really, to me, when he goes, this entire scheme, I believe, comes to an end when Oswald goes to the Soviet Union. And the Oswald who went to the Soviet Union, I don't believe was the real Lee Harvey Oswald. I believe that he was the the fluent Russian speaker who they were planning to enact into this kind of plot. But see, all this is just speculation. There's not enough data out there, but I'll tell you what is out there. The CIA had a program from 1959 through 1962 called AE Balcony. AE Balcony was a program specifically designed to recruit naturalized American citizens, meaning people who moved to America to become citizens who spoke fluent, what they called Baltic languages, which included Russian. And then they would take these fluent naturalized American citizens and then send them back to the Soviet Union, Lithuania, a whole bunch of these Baltic countries for the purposes of spying and to recruit other people there. Now, what years was Oswald in the Soviet Union? 1959 to 1962, the exact same years that this program AE Balcony was in place. And if the program was dependent upon recruiting naturalized American citizens, that would lend credence to John Armstrong's theory that the duplicate Oswald was in fact a Russian speaking child who was raised in America, because that's what the program AE Balcony recruited, right? So it's not proof, but it's the identical years that Oswald was in the Soviet Union, and it used naturalized citizens. And so if there was a duplicate Oswald who was actually a Russian speaker from another country, then it totally fits. It totally fits with Armstrong's theory. Remember, just to point it out, it's not my theory, it's Armstrong's theory. And I have problems with other aspects of Armstrong's theories, particularly post-1959. But up until 1959, John Armstrong's notion that there were duplicate Oswalds, I can't find any holes in it. And all the data he presents is seemingly legit and checks out. So, but the problem that I have with Armstrong's theories is that he didn't know what to do with this duplicate Oswald theory post-59. And this is what I found post-59. Starting in 1959, the United States government was in fact having people impersonate Oswald in America while he was in the Soviet Union. I mean, this is just fact. Numerous incidents, including one at Bolton Ford in New Orleans, early 1960, January 1960. Two guys go to Bolton Ford and they want to buy a whole bunch of Jeeps for the Friends of Democratic Cuba. Okay? The Friends of Democratic, and they give the name Lee Oswald. And the other guy gives the name Joseph Moore, which is just an alias. But the Friends of Democratic Cuba was opened at 544 Camp Street as a CIA front for funneling money to the anti-Castro Cubans. But even the funneling of money to the anti-Castro Cubans was a front. All the fucking funneling of money and weapons to the anti-Castro Cubans never happened. All that shit got deflected to Israel through a company called Interarmco, run by a guy named Samuel Cummings, who was connected to Permindex, right? So like, you get these fucking Permindex guys connected to like every aspect of this thing. Even our history that we think is true, like the CIA didn't give two fucks about Cuba. Okay, I don't believe for a split second we had any plans to assassinate Castro. That is all smoke and mirrors, because I can prove with almost absolute certainty we were using Cuba in the after the Bay of Pigs up through like 66, 67 at least, probably through the early 70s, as a jump off point for CIA smuggling. So how the fuck is the CIA going to end up smuggling shit using Cuba as a jump off point if Castro is not involved with them? Give me a fucking break. They needed Castro. I don't understand. I think the whole entire war against Castro that we've had for 60, 70 fucking years, whatever it's been, has all been a front for basically to hide the excess spending of the military industrial complex. Pretty much. When you have a war against communism, they can dump billions and trillions of dollars into it. And everyone's like, okay, so fight communism, whatever. Right? That's what I think Castro was. I think that he was covertly working with the CIA as a smuggling partner long after the fucking Bay of Pigs. I think when the Bay of Pigs didn't work, they're like, fuck, we really got to work with this guy because we still need to utilize the ports and we still need to utilize some of the operations going on there. So let's just go make peace with him. And I think that's exactly what the fuck they did. And that's why he was never killed. And that's why he was never ousted, because he had backroom deals with our intelligence agencies.
There's really interesting theories. Yeah. I mean, there's really interesting theories about like Marilyn Monroe fucking Fidel Castro and JFK both.
She fucked everybody, man. She fucked everybody.
Hey, I still would do it though. I still would take a ride on that.
Yeah, I honestly I don't know a whole lot about her, but like I know enough about her involvement with the mob guys and JFK that like I just felt bad for her. She was like a little Midwestern girl who got caught up with the wrong people because she was hot. And everybody fucked her. And when she got killed, she was definitely raped when she was killed.
Yeah.
And she had a bruised colon which means they stuffed something up her fucking ass when they killed her. So
Well,
yeah, I feel
actually, one of our friends did really good work on the assassination or the killing of her, where yeah, like there was enemas that were used to kill
yeah.
her, and there's like drug laced enemas, and that's gonna get you fucking high as a kite to
Well,
the point
also,
where
but there was also bruising to the colon, which means
yeah, like
that
they were
something was
forcing
they
yeah.
were forcing something up there. So yeah, I just whenever every time I think about her, I understand the people that she was involved with way better than she ever did, and fucking
Yeah.
they were monsters, man. Like,
Well, she was just trying to get money, dude. She was just doing her thing. And like, obviously I don't think she was any angel or anything. I don't know necessarily, obviously, but greed will get you in those kinds of ways. It's a crazy story, but yeah, wild shit, man. Just you brought up Castro. I figured I'd throw that little piece out there that I heard that there's even in like Call of Duty video games and stuff, they show Fidel Castro, buddying up with JFK and like the Call of Duty zombies and stuff. Like it's a wild goofy, I guess. I don't know, man. The fucking world's just so weird. It's too damn confusing, and it's cool that you can do this kind of work, Cory, and get, I mean, at least some clarity on some of this shit.
yeah,
That's
when you really
fascinating.
understand what it comes down to, it's like really the driving factors behind the New World Order are Zionist fucking. They're all Zionists. They're at the heart of it. They're fucking occultists. That's why they don't mind killing all of us non fucking Jews.
Yeah,
I mean, the Talmud supports all this stuff, right? I mean,
yeah. I call them the old world order, though. I think the new world
it
order
is
was
the
meant
old
to be
world.
a
It's
good.
exactly what it is.
It
You
was
fucking
meant
nailed
the
it.
new
Exactly.
the new world order was meant to be a good thing, but the old world order infiltrated the new world order, and now it's the new world order. They're trying to get us back to that serf and master system, as the slave
Mhm.
system, and they're
Well,
doing a
after
hell
they
of a
kill
job.
most of us, which I think I literally think in the next 5 years, half the world's going to die from the vaccine. So,
We'll see, man.
and that's a big part of it. That's a big part of it. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
but
hope
they
you're
have this.
wrong, but
I
yeah,
hope
we'll
I'm
see.
wrong too, but they have this occult shit like is in everything. Like I did a lot of work on COVID. Like I know shit about COVID that no one else has figured out yet. And fucking when you look at the dates that certain things happen, they co-align with ancient Jewish holidays and stuff. Really fucked up stuff. So
Hmm.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, man. Incredible stuff, man. Ghost, I
Yeah.
don't know if you had anything else, dude.
No, incredible. And when you brought in the Castro thing, money laundering, the what came to mind is, we're still fighting Russia, and now you have Zelensky in there, and we're funneling.
but here's let me comment on this real quick. I'll take a couple minutes on this one. So what the fuck's going on with Russia and the Ukraine? Well, where are the Khazarians from? They're
Ukraine.
fucking Ukraine.
Ukraine.
They're from the goddamn Donbass. All right. And so now the fucking Jew, you don't tell me the fucking Zionists, they really don't know their real history. Bullshit. They know their real history. And now the Russians just fucking annexed part of their homeland. No,
Is
they ain't gonna let this
Zelensky
go.
George Soros' son? Come on.
I don't know, but they're all in the same mindset.
Yeah.
But this war is going to go on for goddamn ever, and they will fucking put American troops on the ground, and it will become as close to World War III as can get, because there's no way these fucking ancient occultists are going to let the Russians, who drove them out of their homeland in the first place, annex their homeland. And that's exactly what the fuck just happened. And people think that this war in fucking Russia and Ukraine has to do with fucking oil and fucking bullshit. No, this is an ancient war that is coming to fruition in the Ukraine currently. So read The
World War
13th
Zero.
Tribe by Arthur Kistler. That'll explain all of it. And there's another one called Facts or Facts, all about the Khazarians and what. It's really good stuff. But yeah, this fucking war in Russia, far more significant historically than most people realize.
Incredible information, Cory.
Yes.
Just wild. Yeah, Ghost, really enjoyed this episode, man.
Yeah, me too. I sat here. I mean, granted, I had to step away for a second, but man, holy shit! I'm just sitting here. Gears are turning and lights are coming on. I'm just like, holy fuck! I'm gonna have to actually probably listen back to this episode just to get.
Well, you should watch I did a 7-hour presentation on Kennedy. It covers all this stuff, so you should just watch
Is
that.
the one you sent me on
Yeah.
Telegram? Okay.
Yep.
I'll make
That's
sure.
it. That's the fucking. It's my magnum opus.
Where can people find that presentation, Cory?
CoryHughes.org. And then all the links are you can find there. Plus, I do a podcast with Charlie Robinson and Lindsay Sharman called Day Zero on Sundays. And I do a podcast called Understanding Propaganda, which I've been taking a little bit of a break from because I've been so busy writing my book. But like, I still put out. I might put this out on that channel just to put some filler up there. But yeah, so I spent many years studying just propaganda and World War II and the OSS, and like, yeah, when you kind of understand propaganda, you can see through everything.
Yeah.
Good deal.
That's what they use to control everything.
Yep. It's wild stuff, man. Yeah.
Yeah, Cory, thank you again for agreeing to sit down with Ryan and I. And wow, yeah, I look forward to doing a Holocaust episode for sure.
Yep.
And I
And
know
you'll find out all the gas chambers are fakes. So
bam. I love blowing up these holes that people are too scared to kind of tackle. You know what I mean? Because like, oh
I got
my
nothing to
God, he
lose.
said Jew,
And
and
if
it's
they
like,
fucking kill me, my book will sell like crazy.
yeah,
So
there you go.
Hey, it's a win-win, you know?
Hopefully, you have somebody to pass the money on to.
hopefully.
But
So yeah, man, thanks for having me on the show.
yes, and to my guess, Ryan, do you want to plug anything before you go
No,
for your
man, just
guest?
Dangerous World podcast. I appreciate everybody out there listening, and this was a great episode for sure. Significant day. R.I.P. JFK. We're releasing it obviously that day, and yeah, it's interesting. Know that the guy wasn't perfect, and probably a worse president than he is touted as being, like the greatest of all time.
Well, he stole the fucking election.
Of course they
Yes.
did. Come on, with a Texas Democrat. Come on, you're gonna tell me that they ran that shit fucking honestly? Yeah.
Well, they
No,
hired fucking Joe Kennedy hired Giancana and the mob to fucking steal ballot boxes. There's a book been written on it. They have the specifics on which ballot boxes were actually stolen, what votes were in it, a whole 9 yards. Like he
well,
stole that fucking thing, and that's why
Cory,
they didn't mind killing him because he fucked him on a deal.
maybe I can give you. You gave me so much information that was really interesting. Maybe I can give you one piece of information that you didn't know about Lyndon B. Johnson. Do you know the significance with him and the Catholic Church by chance? The connection there?
Okay, so I don't offhand, but I've touched upon this in my research in the past, and I'll tell you what, Jack Valente was key in organizing meetings between the Pope and LBJ. I know that for fact.
Okay, so the first ever Catholic president, selecting this guy, which they don't really understand why he's chosen as the running mate, right? It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Lyndon B. Johnson instituted the 501c3 for the Catholic Church.
Ooh. Well, Lyndon Johnson never won an election. He stole every fucking election. He was basically a Zionist puppet all the time. He's a Jewish Zionist. I mean, no one talks about it, but we've had three Jewish presidents: Hamilton, Lincoln, and Johnson. And so Johnson was the first Jewish Zionist, and he handed Israel the keys to the kingdom, like straight to fuck up.
So can I ask you a question? What are your thoughts on Lincoln actually being a black man?
No, Lincoln was a Jew. Lincoln was a Jew. It's possible his real name wasn't even Lincoln. It's possible that his real last name was Springsteen. But when you study Lincoln, you'll come to find that I'm not an expert on the Civil War, but I have friends who are. You'll come to find that the fucking Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. It had to do with Lincoln selling out the country to fucking Jewish corporate interests, and the South was like, "Go fuck yourself. We ain't want any part of this."
And that's what the Civil War was too, right? Taxes was a huge part of that, and just importing shit,
right,
and exporting. Yeah, it's very interesting. Wild stuff, man.
Yeah,
awesome.
Like the North was definitely the bad guys in the Civil War, but the history is always written by the victor. So, and it had nothing to do with slavery. Fuck, half the states in the North still had slavery at the time. So, the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't fucking passed for 2 years after the war started. So yeah, it had nothing to do with slavery, and that's the fucking myth that everyone believes in. The reality of the matter is that Lincoln was a fucking tyrant and probably one of the worst presidents we ever fucking had. Destroyed this country on a fucking economic level that we probably never recovered from.
He made the fucking greenbacks, dude. I mean, this is another issue. So yeah,
he's so touted, especially by Republicans now, and then now Democrats trying to say, "Oh no, he was one of us," and party flipped and got it.
Well, he never lied. That's another important thing.
Well, yeah, honest Abe,
not once.
But wow,
it's like fucking George Lincoln and like the cherry tree or whatever that story is. Like, just mythological bullshit, historical propaganda.
I wish more people would get off their asses and do a little bit of your own homework and look into what Cory is presenting, because and not just with JFK. I mean, pick any part of history and you're going to find that 90% of it is bullshit. And we're always lied to, and we'll always be lied to until, I don't know, I'm not calling for a revolution around the world, but something needs to change. There's more of us than there are the leaders. So
hey, us as people, we like being lied to. We like a little abuse,
Yeah.
Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, I like Munchausen syndrome better, but hey. That's just me. I'm weird. But yeah. So thanks for coming on again. And to my guests, again, like always, thank you for tuning in and think for yourself.